Welcome back to the PH and EV podcast. We are your hosts, Ron and John, and this is our third and last installment of the series. Let's have a quick recap. For the first installment, we talked about the accessibility of e-vehicles in the Philippines. And for the second installment, we talked about government programs supporting the use of these e-vehicles. So now, can you guess what we'll talk about for the third installment?
So let's get straight to the point. Anyway, for the third installment, we will be talking about some of the problems that come with EVs, mainly with owning one to implementing it to our transport systems.
Yet we must preface that all of our opinions stated here are subject to change and aren't concrete as of the moment. Simply put, take whatever we say with a grain of salt as we are not experts in this field whatsoever. We are simply just students talking about complicated stuff.
Well, the first question that comes to mind is that electric vehicles may actually be worse for the environment due to the use of lithium batteries. What do you think about that?
Well, there are indeed studies that show that manufacturing EVs can create more carbon pollution than making gasoline cars. I believe that looking at the timeline of a vehicle's use holds more importance as that's what is correlated with its main use, which is to transport people around.
Indeed, specifically referencing the US's Environmental Protection Agency, or EPA for short, there were lower total greenhouse gas emissions during the manufacturing process to driving an EV as compared to a gasoline car's emissions.
That also reminds me of the findings by researchers at the Argonne National Laboratory that although EVs emit 8% more greenhouse gas emission during its manufacturing process, it was still proven that traditional gas cars still emit the most amount of GHG emissions.
So, what exactly are the problems that come with owning an electric vehicle?
For one, the insurance. EV insurance is a terrific investment, but it might be challenging to locate a competitive all-inclusive insurance plan that covers your e-vehicle. EVs also cost more to insure because the replacement parts are 2.7% more expensive than gas-powered vehicles, and their battery ranges in prices from $5,000 to $15,000 according to green cars.
Oh, as far as I know, an EV's driving range is also shorter than that of a gas-powered vehicle. For EVs, the driving range is affected by the speed, temperature, and terrain, making it challenging for long-distance drivers. For example, the temperature. The range of an electric car is shorter because unlike a gas-powered vehicle, where heat is generated by the engine, heat and energy is for maintaining a suitable battery temperature must both be derived from the battery.
Right? The charging availability also poses a problem. There are not many charging stations available. The type of start, the type of station and battery capacity of the vehicle can both affect how quickly a station can charge a car. However, due to the efforts of the National Economic Development Authority and the Electric Vehicle Industry Development Act, Luzon is seeing an increase in the number of charging stations.
So true, the maintenance can also be a hassle, though EVs generally require less maintenance. When they do, EVs need specialized experts to undertake maintenance and repairs. To increase the longevity of a battery, it must be kept within a set temperature range and charged and discharged in a particular manner.
Not only that, but the initial cost of EVs are also so much higher than gasoline-powered vehicles. Because of that, people find it harder to use electric vehicles.
And it seems that Filipinos are hesitant to switch to EV because of it, as evident in the Deloitte 2023 Global Automotive Consumer Study, which revealed 72% of Filipino consumers prefer gas or diesel engines as opposed to internal combustion engines.
Didn't that same study also cite that higher fuel cost amounts to 55% of the main motivation? Well, I don't really blame them as it can cost up to 100,000 to 200,000 to install a charging station.
But I'd argue it's a good investment as a DOE official said fuel consumption for EVs costs up to 501 pesos for 300 kilometers a month, while conventional cars cost 1,500 pesos for the same distance and time.
Well, I have another question for you. Instead of focusing on individually owning an EV and the problems associated with that, what do you think are the challenges for the EV industry, like in terms of law, regulation, and development?
I'm glad you asked. In actuality, the EV industry here in the Philippines has actually been taking off, especially back in April 2022, which was the time when the Republic Act number 11697, or the Electric Vehicle Industry Development Act, EVIDA for short, lapsed into law.
If I could recall, that's the law that aims to develop and regulate the EV industry in the Philippines, right?
More specifically, people who own EVs or any hybrid vehicle are fully exempted from coding, nullifying any need to buy a second car. The law also includes priority for vehicle renewal and registration, specialized license plates, and even excise tax exemptions to spur interest in e-vehicle operations for a greener future in the Philippines.
That sounds pretty great actually, especially since out of the other eight Southeast Asian countries, the Philippines showed the lowest inclination in purchasing hybrid electric vehicles. But as much as I don't want to bring this topic up, will this be the end for traditional gas transportation like jeepneys?
I'm kinda glad you mentioned that. But we must first understand renewable sources and their practicality. Although in theory, it is entirely feasible to have 100% of our energy produced from renewable sources, it's incredibly uneconomical and impractical to make such an investment in reality, especially coming from a third world country. Hence, it is also entirely uneconomical and even downright unethical to phase out such technology due to its quote unquote impact on the environment.
Correct. I noticed that some individuals mistook our campaign as being pro jeepney phase out, and I don't really blame them for that. But what we truly advocate for take is that governments take notice of this kind of technology and find ways to incorporate it into our systems before it's too late. After all, doesn't a modern society entail continuous adaptation to advancing available technology?
That reminds me much of Antonio Lopez's blog entry for the Asian Development blog, wherein it was mentioned that countries must find the optimal amalgamation of renewable sources and fossil fuels, depending on factors such as initial cost and current energy demand.
If I could recall, the same blog cited that it is currently hard for investors to make upfront investment due to current renewables having less reliability, such as solar or wind, due to changing weather patterns, therefore, higher risk perception.
And to also mention that land is a big factor in cost effectiveness, as if we were really to rely entirely on energy derived from biomass, we will need to dedicate 10% of the world's land, approximately all the land used in human agriculture to date, to grow fuel, like what Professor Martin Hoffert said in an interview with PBS. So you can imagine a world where the only things on the planet will be human beings and wheat, and we will eat the wheat and we will use the wheat to make alcohol for our vehicles. But no other biological diversity will exist because we will have appropriated all of the land surfaces to do that.
Well, that sounds like a lesser version of a George Orwell novel, huh? Now, moving back to EVs and its implementation to our systems. Technically, if we were to be realistic with this, we can set up Indonesia as an example. Its state firms have set a 3-year deadline to use only electric vehicles as part of reaching net zero emission by 2060.
Oh, that's interesting. That reminds me much of the mandate that also came with RA 11697 that requires all public and private sectors to have at least 5% of their fleets to be composed of EVs. And as we mentioned, that may be the better option in a realistic and practical viewpoint since it is highly unlikely to be completely emission free.
Precisely that. Anyway, I think our podcast is coming to an end. So let's wrap this up quickly.
Indeed, we would also like to say that although EVs pose many questions as it is a newer type of technology, we hope that this won't stir any interest away.
We entirely believe that the utilization of said technology can be a huge step forward in achieving an environmentally friendly and sustainable future.
With that, we hope that you were able to learn something from our podcast series. So, we will leave you with this question. Even if EVs pose many unsolved problems right now, will you still be willing to use one in the future?